My friends, this isn't another silent script. This isn't about pulling away and hoping they notice. This is about pulling back the curtain on the lie they sold you, that they didn't care, that they were over it, that you somehow didn't measure up. No, today we're going deeper. This is a psychological exposé. The kind that doesn't just comfort you, it wakes you up. Because when someone keeps pushing you away, again and again, despite your truth, despite your effort, despite the energy you brought into their life, it's not because you were too much. It's because you were the mirror they couldn't stand to look into. You didn't break them. You revealed them. You brought something real, something stable, something that required them to be honest with themselves. And the truth is, most people aren't ready to meet themselves. They're not rejecting you. They're dodging the parts of themselves your presence awakened. It's like handing someone a drink of cold water after they've lived on smoke. They cough. They resist it, not because it's bad, but because it's clean. You were clean. You were clear. And that clarity, it burned them. You need to understand something right now. When someone pretends not to care, when they push you away with silence or betrayal, when they choose ego over connection, that's not peace, that's panic. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." And folks, that's what we're doing today. We're pulling back the lie that their rejection was about you. It never was. It was about the pressure your presence applied to their chaos. It was about how calm you were, in contrast to their storm. You reminded them of what they hadn't healed, what they hadn't faced, and instead of rising to meet you, they backed away in fear, then dressed it up as indifference. That's the secret most never admit. The person who hurt you didn't walk away because you were weak. They walked away because they were. You held depth, and depth requires courage. Shallow hearts can't hold it. They don't know how to sit still in stillness. They confuse love with control, connection with possession. And when you showed them a version of love that asked for nothing but truth, they froze. Because your honesty didn't flatter their mask, it threatened it. So stop wondering why they left. Stop thinking if you were more this or less that, they would have stayed. The truth is, they wanted you, deeply, but their fear wanted control more. And now, that battle between desire and denial is raging inside of them. They'll cover it with laughs. They'll hide it behind new faces. But peace doesn't live in people who betray themselves, and walking away from you was a betrayal to themselves. You are not the wound. You were the medicine they spit out because healing tasted bitter. You didn't lose anything. You were a gift that was refused. And the price of that refusal, it's rising every day. You may not see it yet, but inside they're folding. Not because you're gone, but because you weren't supposed to be the one that got away. And now, the silence you left isn't just space, it's pressure. So stand tall, not with vengeance, but with vision. You're not here to chase broken people. You're here to build a stronger you. This is the path of the Stoic. Calm, clear, unshakable. Let them feel the weight of what they threw away. Let them sit in the fire they lit. Now, take a breath, my friend, not the shallow kind you've been surviving on. I mean a real one, the kind that sinks into your chest and reminds you that you're still here, still standing, still rising, because after everything they did to dim your light, you're still the one carrying truth in your bones. And that truth, it's your weapon now. So don't just read this and scroll like nothing hit. Don't do that to yourself. If even one sentence struck a nerve, if you felt seen, exposed, or finally validated, don't keep that locked up. Type it in the comments right now. I see the truth. Say it like you mean it. Carve it into the digital stone. Let the world know you're not fooled anymore. This isn't just a comment, it's a declaration. a turning point. And if you're still with me, if your soul is buzzing with the kind of fire that only honesty can spark, then press that like button right now, subscribe, and stay close. Because what's coming next, it'll change everything. Chapter 1. They loved the mirror, but hated the reflection. My friends, let's tell the truth. No one wants to admit. You weren't just a person in their life, you were a mirror. Not the kind they could decorate, not the kind they could control. You were the kind that showed them exactly who they were, when no one else could. You saw through the performance, through the charm, through the image they wanted the world to applaud. And when they looked into your eyes, they didn't just see your love, they saw themselves, unmasked, unfiltered, unhealed. And that's what made them flinch. They didn't push you away because you were too much. They pushed you away because you were too real, and real doesn't flatter the ego, it exposes it. You ever wonder why someone who claimed to care about you suddenly acted cold, distant, or cruel? Why someone who once lit up at the sound of your voice now acts like you're invisible? You might have told yourself, maybe I did too much. Maybe I cared too quickly. Maybe they needed space. But the truth, my friend, is deeper than that. It's darker. They weren't running from you. They were running from who they saw themselves becoming in your presence. Because you didn't just offer them attention, you offered them elevation. And elevation requires accountability. It demands growth. And growth, that scares the hell out of people who have been surviving on shortcuts and shallow love. See, when you're used to living behind a mask, real love feels like an interrogation. Your love didn't just say, I see you. It said, I see all of you, and I'm not leaving. And while that sounds romantic, for someone who hasn't faced themselves, that kind of presence is suffocating. Because now they can't pretend, now they can't hide behind their distractions, their false confidence, their cheap validation. You saw them fully, and that scared them more than losing you ever could. They didn't walk away because you failed them. They walked away because you revealed them. And some people would rather destroy a connection than sit in the discomfort of their own reflection. It's like this. Imagine holding up a mirror to someone who's never cleaned their face. At first, they laugh. They brush it off. They think they're fine. But when that mirror doesn't blink, when it doesn't flatter, when it keeps reflecting back the raw and the real, they start to hate it. Not because the mirror is wrong, but because it's right. You were right, and that's what they couldn't handle. But here's the part no one tells you. It's not your job to shrink yourself so they feel safe in their illusion. It's not your duty to tone down your truth so they don't have to face theirs. You are not here to be easy to swallow. You are here to be real, and realness has consequences. Some of you are still asking, but why couldn't they rise with me? Why did they run when I was patient, when I loved them purely, when I wanted to build something deeper? Let me answer that for you, because rising hurts. Growth costs. And it's easier to blame the one holding the mirror than to admit you've been pretending this whole time. It's easier to label you as too intense than to confess that they're too shallow to meet you at your level. It's easier to ghost you than to say, you see a version of me that I don't know how to live up to. It's easier to leave than to change. And this is the cruel irony of it all. They did want you. They still do, but they want you without the responsibility that comes with being truly seen. They want your light, but not the shadows it reveals. They want the comfort, not the call to grow. They want the benefits of love without the weight of becoming worthy of it. That's why they loved the mirror, but hated the reflection. So where does that leave you? Stronger than you think. Because someone else's inability to rise is not your failure. It's their decision, and no matter how much you loved them, no matter how much potential you saw, you cannot drag someone into their becoming. They have to choose it, and until they do, they will always find a reason to push you away, even when everything in them is pulling toward you. But let me tell you this, and hear it clearly, their rejection is not your ruin. It's your revelation. It's showing you that your light is too loud for small minds, that your presence is too pure for people still addicted to performance, that your love is too whole for half-healed hearts. So don't internalize their distance. Don't wear their silence like a scar. You weren't dismissed. You were divine. They just couldn't hold it. And the absence you're sitting in now, it's not emptiness, it's space. Space for you to rise, to heal, to protect your energy, to grow into the version of yourself that doesn't wait for anyone to finally see what's been shining all along. You are not the problem. You were the pressure. You were the push. You were the truth they didn't know how to hold without breaking. And when they finally look back, because they will, they won't remember the texts, the laughter, the photos. They'll remember the weight of your gaze, the way your silence held more truth than their words ever could, the way they felt seen and couldn't handle it. That's what they'll regret. That's what they'll crave. But by then, you won't be in reach, not because you're cruel, but because you're clear. You're not here to babysit broken souls who fear healing. You're here to build something sacred, and only those willing to meet you in truth will ever get to stay. Now take this moment, take this truth, and write it down in your spirit. I was the mirror. Type it in the comments right now. Not for them, for you. Let it be your reminder. Let it be your line in the sand. And if this opened your eyes, if this shook your soul just a little, press that like button, subscribe, and stay with me. Because the reflection they feared is just the beginning of your rise. Chapter 2. The Push-Away Reflex. Fear dressed as power. My friends, what you thought was rejection may have been something far more fragile, far more afraid. See, not every go away means I don't want you. Sometimes it's fear, dressed up, polished, wearing the mask of indifference. But underneath it, there's panic, there's vulnerability, there's the quiet scream of someone who just realized how deeply you could reach inside them, and they didn't know how to handle it. Let's break the lie wide open. People don't always walk away because they don't care. Sometimes they push you away because they care too much, and caring makes them feel powerless. You touched places inside of them that haven't been touched in years, maybe ever, and that kind of depth doesn't feel soft. It feels dangerous because it threatens the walls they built for survival. It cracks open the armor they've worn for so long, they forgot it was armor. So what do they do when the emotions get too loud? When your presence starts to feel like exposure? When your truth begins pulling the masks off their carefully managed persona? They pull the emergency brake. They start arguments over nothing. They disappear for hours or days. They act irritated, detached, or cold. But it's not because they don't feel. It's because they feel too much, and their mind can't process it without grabbing onto something to control. And you, standing there with your open heart, your clear intentions, your loyalty, and your energy, you became too unpredictable for their emotional ego. Not because you were chaotic, but because you were powerful, emotionally powerful, spiritually grounding. And in the world of wounded people, that kind of force gets mistaken for danger. Imagine someone trapped underwater for years. They've adapted to the darkness. They've learned to breathe in panic, and then suddenly you show up with oxygen, with light, with possibility. What do? You'd think they'd swim towards you, right? But no, they panic, they flail, because safety to them is the very thing they've been taught to fear. That's the push-away reflex. It's when someone chooses control over connection, when they would rather feel strong and detached than vulnerable and open. Because they've learned, maybe through childhood, maybe through heartbreak, maybe through betrayal, that love equals danger. So they push hard, and they tell themselves that staying in control keeps them safe. But what they don't see is what they're actually losing. You weren't a threat, you were the cure. But to someone living in survival mode, even medicine can feel like poison. So don't take it personal when they ghosted you. Don't carry the weight of their fear like it's your fault. Don't spend your nights wondering why your kindness wasn't enough. It was more than enough. That's exactly why they ran. Because with you, there was no room to pretend. And for people addicted to pretense, that kind of rawness is terrifying. You see, real connection comes with risk, and not everyone has the courage to hold something real. It's safer to push away the thing that makes them feel out of control, because once someone admits they care, they feel exposed, and exposure to them feels like weakness. But it's not weakness, it's strength, and that's the part they never got to. You are not someone who came on too strong. You're someone who showed up with presence, with stability, with depth. They weren't ready for that, not because you're too much, but because they were still living small, still living safe, still calling fear strength and avoidance boundaries. But don't let that shake your ground. You did nothing wrong by being real. You did nothing wrong by offering love. The push-away reflex is not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of their readiness. And now that they've slammed the door, now that they've run from the very thing they once begged the universe for, they're left with silence, with space, with echoes of what they couldn't hold. You're not their weakness. You were their awakening. So breathe, my friend. Stand tall in this truth and say it with me. I was not the threat. Write it in the comments right now. Stamp it with your soul. And if this unlocked something deep inside of you, press that like button, subscribe, and stay with me. Because this isn't about being pushed away anymore. This is about rising anyway. Chapter 3. The Shame of Being Known. Too Deeply. My friends, let's go even deeper, because this next truth, it cuts beneath the skin. Shame is a quiet destroyer. It doesn't always yell, it doesn't always confess. Sometimes it hides behind the very person smiling at you while pushing you away. And the tragedy, it wasn't your honesty that broke them, it was their own reflection in your presence. You saw them, not just the version they let the world applaud, not the carefully edited version they post online. You saw behind the mask. You saw the insecurity hiding beneath the confidence, the wounds behind the jokes, the guilt buried underneath the charm. And that, my friend, is where everything shifted. Because being loved is one thing, but being seen, that's different. That's rare. That's terrifying for someone who's never learned to sit with their own soul. You didn't fall for their potential. You fell for their truth. You loved the unspoken parts of them. You spoke life into the places they had long abandoned. And for a brief moment, they felt naked in a way they hadn't felt in years. Emotionally, spiritually, psychologically. And instead of embracing that rawness as a blessing, it activated something darker, shame. See, when someone hasn't faced their pain, when they've spent years curating an identity that hides the mess, they don't welcome the one who sees through it. They punish them. Why? Because deep down, they believe they don't deserve that kind of love, that kind of attention, that kind of mercy. They believe, often unconsciously, that if you truly knew them, you'd leave. So the moment you do see them, and stay, it breaks their entire framework of self-worth. It short-circuits their defenses, and shame takes over. Shame whispers, "You're not lovable." Shame says, "They'll leave like everyone else." Shame convinces them that your love is a trap, too good to be true, and instead of saying thank you, they pull away, they hurt you, they shut down, they sabotage. It's like this. Imagine a child who's been living in a dark basement for years. Suddenly, someone walks in and opens all the windows. Light floods in. It's not painful, but it's shocking. That child doesn't run into the light right away. They cower. They cover their face. They cry. Not because the light is wrong, but because the darkness had become home. You were that light, and they weren't ready to be seen. Some of you are still confused, still asking, why did they treat me like the enemy when I only wanted to love them? Because love that sees you deeply and stays is unfamiliar territory for someone buried in shame. You didn't insult them. You didn't abandon them. You just saw too much. And when you see someone's shadow and don't flinch, it confronts them with a truth they've never faced. Maybe they're the ones who keep running. But listen to me now. Do not let their shame become your burden. Do not let their self-hatred twist into your self-doubt. You were the light, not the lie. You were the one who stayed present while they turned their back. And that doesn't make you weak. It makes you rare. They didn't reject you because you failed. They rejected you because you succeeded. You loved them in a way that made all their defenses irrelevant. And that kind of power, that kind of sacred sight, it scared the hell out of them. But don't dim yourself to become more digestible for broken people. You're not here to make others comfortable in their denial. You're here to be a lighthouse. Not everyone will reach you, but those who are ready will never forget where you are. So breathe with me, stand in the light you offered, and say this out loud. I saw their truth. Write it in the comments right now. Claim it. Etch it into your memory. And if this reminded you of your power, press that like button, subscribe, and stay with me. We're not done yet. Their shame couldn't handle your love, but your strength? It's just getting started. Chapter 4. Craving You. In silence, but never saying it. My friends, let's get brutally honest about something that eats at them every single day, whether they admit it or not. They still want you, deeply, quietly, reluctantly, but they crave you in silence. And silence is a dangerous place when desire has no language. Don't let the fake smiles fool you. Don't be deceived by the social media highlights, the casual texts, the way they seem to have moved on without flinching. That's not peace, that's pride, that's performance, and under it, they're starving. They think about you more than they'll ever admit. They replay moments in their mind, things you said, the way you looked at them, the calm you brought into their chaos. But instead of speaking it out loud, they stuff it down. They pretend. Because to want you now would mean confessing that they were wrong to ever let you go. That they didn't know how to hold what they asked the universe for. That they sabotaged the very thing they secretly prayed for at night. And pride. Pride would rather suffer in silence than kneel to truth. You ever wonder why someone checks your profile but never says anything? Why they still keep tabs on you from the shadows? Why you feel their energy even when they're not around? It's not your imagination. It's not wishful thinking. It's spiritual gravity. Because real connection leaves fingerprints, and your presence left marks they can't wipe off, no matter how many distractions they chase. But here's the painful twist. They crave you and avoid you at the same time. It's like being thirsty but too proud to drink. like standing in front of a fire on a freezing night and walking away just to prove they're strong enough to survive the cold. That's what they're doing now, freezing, pretending it doesn't hurt, telling themselves they made the right choice while secretly aching to feel what they gave up. Why? Because to admit they want you is to admit they feel. And people who run from vulnerability will do anything to keep that door shut. They'll flirt with others. They'll post cryptic quotes. They'll dive into fake situationships. But none of it sticks. None of it lands. Because you weren't just a chapter. You were the book they didn't finish reading. And now they keep trying to replace the story with a cheaper version. The truth is, you weren't hard to love. You were hard to lie to. You weren't intimidating. You were revealing. And that's what keeps echoing in them. They remember how safe they felt around you, how effortless it was to just be. They remember the depth in your voice, the stillness in your energy, the way you never needed to shout to be heard. And now, that absence is roaring in their soul. But don't expect them to say it. Don't wait for the confession. They'll sit with their craving and dress it up as distance. Because real, to them, is risky. Real means putting the mask down. Real means owning their mess. And they're not ready for that. Not yet. You see, my friend, some people would rather live haunted than humbled. They'd rather miss you quietly than face you honestly, and that's their burden to carry, not yours. You did your part. You showed up. You stayed real. And now your energy is the standard they compare everything else to, and nothing feels the same. So let them crave. Let them miss you in silence. Let them choke on the words they're too proud to say. You're not their secret anymore. You're their standard. And the silence they sit in, that's not strength. That's surrender, without dignity. Now breathe with me. Stand in that truth. And say it. They crave me still. Write it in the comments right now. Etch it into your reality. And if this lit a fire in your chest, press that like button, subscribe, and stay with me, because craving without courage is their curse. But clarity, that's your crown. Chapter 5. When ego fights the heart bleeds in secret. My friends, let's call this what it is, war. Not between you and them. No, this is the war inside of them, a battle between the ego that wants control and the heart that wants you. And for now, the ego won. But the heart? Oh, the heart is bleeding in secret, quietly, slowly, constantly. They chose pride. They chose to be right instead of real, to look strong instead of be honest. And maybe it looked like confidence to the outside world. Maybe they even convinced you for a while. The silence, the indifference, the cold shoulder. But underneath all of it, they're not at peace. They're pacing. They're punishing themselves for not being brave enough to hold something real when it was right in front of them. This is what happens when someone chooses ego over connection. The applause feels good for a moment. The mask stays intact. They keep the upper hand. But later, when the phone is silent, when the fake smile fades, when the conversations with others start to feel empty, that's when the regret creeps in. Not as a dramatic meltdown, but as a quiet ache that doesn't go away. You see, the ego wants to win. It wants the last word, the upper hand, the appearance of being unaffected. But the heart, it just wants truth. And when truth gets buried beneath pride, it doesn't disappear. It festers. It turns into that 2 a.m. anxiety, that dream where you show up and they can't speak. That strange emptiness they can't name, no matter how many people they sit next to. They told themselves they were being strong, that walking away, staying silent, ghosting, cheating, pretending, they convinced themselves that these were power moves. But power without peace is punishment. And right now, they're living inside that punishment. You might think they don't feel it, that they're fine. But ask yourself this: why do they still watch your stories? Why do they ask mutual friends about you, but never reach out? Why do you feel their energy in waves, even when they're physically gone? Because the heart doesn't move on just because the mouth stopped speaking. And the guilt? It doesn't go away just because they refuse to apologize. They know, my friend, they know. They know they messed up. They know they let their ego drive the car and crashed the connection you both were building. But instead of pulling over and repairing, they kept driving, further from you, deeper into the lie. But here's the catch: every mile away from you feels heavier, because they didn't lose someone weak. They lost someone rare, and rare energy. It haunts, not because you're chasing them, but because they can't escape what it felt like to be safe around you, seen by you, held by you, without performance. So now they live in performance mode, rehearsed smiles, filtered joy, safe, shallow conversations, because the moment they go deep again, you'll be there, in their memory, in their spirit, in their conscience. Not as a mistake, but as a missed miracle. You were the piece they thought they'd always have access to. And now that it's gone, they're realizing something painful. Their ego won the argument, but it cost them the connection their soul truly craved. And that price? It's still being paid. Every single day. But don't go back to patch the wound they caused. Don't play the healer when they chose to be the destroyer. Their growth is not your responsibility anymore. You offered presence. They offered pride. That's on them. Now breathe, anchor into this truth, and say it with me. Ego lost everything. Write it in the comments right now. Mark this moment. And if this hit you in the place where clarity meets heartbreak, press that like button, subscribe, and stay with me, because while they bleed in silence, you're rising in power. Chapter 6. You're not the wound. You're the cure they rejected. My friends, let's settle something right now. You were never the wound. You were the cure. You weren't the storm that shattered them. You were the shelter they refused to step into. And that's the part they'll never admit. Not to you, not to themselves. Because owning that truth would mean accepting that they didn't just lose something good. They rejected the very thing they once claimed to be searching for. You were the healing they said they wanted, the peace they whispered about when no one was watching, the safe place they fantasized about when chaos ruled their world. And when that healing finally showed up, in your eyes, in your energy, in your love, they couldn't take it. Not because it wasn't real, but because real requires work. And most people, they want the feeling of being healed, not the discipline of becoming whole. Let's be honest, healing is hard. It's not all crystals and self-care. It's messy, it's quiet, it's sitting with your own shadow and asking, why do I keep destroying the very thing I want to hold? And the truth is, most people are not ready to ask that question, so instead, they push away the person who brings it up without saying a word. You. They blamed you for being too intense, too emotional, too deep. But what they were really saying was, you make me confront myself, and I don't want to. They accused you of demanding too much. But what you actually asked for was honesty, presence, maturity, things they weren't willing to give, not because you weren't worth it, but because they didn't believe they were. You offered connection. They clung to avoidance. You spoke from your heart. They spoke from their defense mechanisms. You were steady. They were scared. You gave love. They gave fear. And then, when the weight of your clarity became too heavy for their confusion to carry, they folded. But let me say this clearly, you did nothing wrong by offering healing. You did nothing wrong by showing up with love that required depth. If they walked away, if they cheated, if they ghosted, if they slowly turned cold, it wasn't because you were too much. It was because you were exactly enough. And that scared them, because your energy demanded transformation, and most people would rather stay broken than break open. They weren't afraid of losing you, they were afraid of changing for you, because change requires accountability, it requires apology, it requires effort, and effort is the one thing the unhealed avoid at all costs. So now they're searching, chasing, distracting, filling the space with noise and faces and temporary highs that numb the ache. But none of it sticks, because deep down they know you weren't the problem, you were the possibility, the one they prayed for and pushed away, the one they weren't ready to receive. But that's their lesson to carry, not yours. You're not a wound to fix. You're a standard to rise to. You're not a bandage. You're the blueprint. And if they couldn't build with you, that's not your failure. That's their fate. So stand firm, not bitter, not angry, just clear, because clarity is the quietest kind of power. And your healing energy, that's not something anyone can replace. It's felt long after you're gone. Now breathe. Let that truth settle into your chest, and say this with me. I was the cure. Write it in the comments right now, not for them, for you. Etch it into your timeline. And if this reminded you of your value, if it whispered strength back into your bones, press that like button, subscribe, and stay with me. Because while they run from healing, you're becoming it. Chapter 7. The Power Shift. You've moved from magnet to mystery. My friends, this is where everything flips. This is the moment the energy shifts. You're no longer the one giving updates, no longer the one reaching out, checking in, offering explanations, or softening their silence with your presence. That version of you, the one they took for granted, is gone. And what's left behind? Not a memory, not a moment, but a mystery. And mystery, my friends, always haunts. You've stopped chasing. You've stopped trying to prove your worth to someone who was blind to it. You've stopped feeding their ego with your consistent availability. And now you've become something they can't access, can't decode, can't predict. You've become the unknown. The unanswered question, the open loop in their mind that won't close, no matter how many distractions they run to. They used to feel in control around you, used to know how you'd react, how you'd respond, how much you'd care, but not anymore. Now you're silent, you're calm, you're collected, and in their world, that silence is deafening. That distance is disturbing, because it doesn't just say, I'm gone, it says, you no longer have access to me. This is when the mind starts racing. Why did they stop caring? Who are they talking to now? Why are they glowing in silence? Did I matter at all to them? And here's the truth. They're not just missing you anymore. They're studying you, watching your silence, analyzing your moves, wondering what happened to the version of you who used to be so accessible, so predictable, so available. But that version didn't vanish. It evolved. You evolved. You see, when you finally pull your energy back, when you stop chasing, stop explaining, stop trying to fix what was never your responsibility, you don't just become absent, you become powerful. Because now every move you don't make, every word you don't say, carries weight. And that weight, it presses down on them in ways your presence never could. They used to feel secure in your presence. Now they feel uneasy in your silence. They used to count on you staying. Now they're counting the days since you left. They used to take your love for granted. Now they can't stop wondering if someone else is holding what they fumbled. But here's the part that cuts the deepest. You're no longer emotionally available, not because you hate them, but because you value yourself. You realize that being the magnet was draining, always pulling, always hoping, always holding it together while they pretended not to care. So you did the unthinkable. You stopped. And now, the magnet has become the mystery. You're not here to be predictable. You're not here to be figured out. You're not here to serve as someone's emotional safety net while they flirt with chaos. You are the unknown now, and the unknown is addictive. It calls to them in their quiet moments, in the middle of the night, in the middle of a conversation with someone they're not even listening to. That silence you left behind, it's speaking volumes. You are no longer the person waiting for a reply. You are the one they wish they could talk to again, but don't even know how. And that, my friend, is the ultimate shift in power. Not because you played a game, but because you stopped playing theirs. So take a breath with me right now. Let that power settle into your spirit, and say this with me: I became the mystery. Write it in the comments right now. Let it be your new identity. Not the one who chased, but the one they can't stop thinking about. And if this message lit something inside you, if it reminded you of what silence really means, press that like button, subscribe, and stay with me. Because your mystery is only just beginning. Chapter 8. Let them drown in the desire they denied. My friends, this is the part where you stand still. Not because you're cold, not because you're heartless, but because you finally understand your value, and you refuse to hand it back to someone who only noticed it after it was gone. Let them drown in the very desire they denied. Let them sit in the silence they created. Let them ache for what they had, what they touched, what they tasted and chose to throw away. Don't go back, not even if they come crawling, not even if the apology is wrapped in tears, in poetry, in promises they should have made when you were still within reach. Because you weren't hard to love, you were hard to lie to. And when someone chooses denial over devotion, they choose the consequences too. You see, when they pushed you away, they weren't rejecting you. They were rejecting growth. They were rejecting healing. They were rejecting the part of themselves that only wakes up when someone real walks in. They didn't want accountability, they wanted convenience. And love like yours? It's never convenient. It's calling. It's confrontational. It asks people to rise. And they weren't ready to rise. Now the craving has set in, not the kind that passes with time, the kind that eats away at them, the kind that shows up in songs, in quiet rooms, in the space beside them that no one else can fill. Because no matter who they run to, no matter how loud they laugh, or how deep they bury themselves in distractions, they remember. Not just you, but the version of themselves that only existed when you were around. That version, it's gone now. And so are you. This is what they didn't calculate when they let you slip through their fingers, that you would not wait forever, that your glow would grow brighter in your absence, that your silence would speak louder than your presence ever did. They thought you were soft, that you'd fold, that you'd come running the second they snapped their fingers. But you didn't. You evolved. You detached. You rose. And now their greatest punishment is not your revenge. It's your refusal. Refusal to play the same game. Refusal to accept less than you deserve. Refusal to give your magic to someone who couldn't even hold your honesty. Let them sit in it. Let them scroll through your photos and wonder if they still matter. Let them stare at your silence like it's a locked door with no key. Because real loss doesn't happen when someone leaves. Real loss happens when they realize they can't return to what they took for granted. And that moment, that realization, it's coming. Some of you are still tempted to answer the message, still tempted to meet them halfway, to give them one more chance to prove they've changed. But I want to ask you, did they change for you, or did they change because they lost you? If someone has to lose you to find your value, they were never aligned with it to begin with. Let them feel the weight of that mistake. Let them carry the silence they created. Let them drown in the desire they denied, not because you're bitter, but because you're done. Your love was not a lesson. It was a gift, a rare one, a soul-opening, heart-expanding, truth-revealing gift. And now it belongs to you again. And so, my friends, let this be your final reminder. You were never the problem. They just weren't ready for your truth. They chose pride over presence, ego over evolution, and now they sit with the weight of what they lost. But you rise, you move, you grow. If this message spoke to your soul, don't keep it to yourself. Press that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Drop your affirmation in the comments. Stay with me, because your healing, your power, your next chapter, it's only just begun.